Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Bava Batra, and this is our 11th class. This is the longest Masechet, so everyone has to buckle up. But we're almost halfway through. This week we're reviewing Daf 72 to Daf 78. So let's begin on Daf 72. Now, if you remember, we've been discussing selling objects. So we're finishing up the fourth chapter, where we're finishing up buying land. The Gemara, if you remember, we were talking about selling land or selling trees. And let's say if you sell trees, do you sell the land underneath the trees or not? So the Gemara tells us that if, let's say, you sold land, but you retained 2 trees for yourself, so then you do get the land that is underneath that. Let's say if you sanctify trees, so then if you sanctify 3 trees in a field, you also sanctify the land that is around that area. And you redeem it, again, when you sanctify something, so you're not actually giving your land to the temple. So what do? You redeem it for a certain amount of money, and then that money you give to the temple. How do you redeem this land? So you redeem it for 1 shekel for every year till the Jubilee year, till the Yovel year, because this is your family property. It's called the Sde Achuzah. This is your family property. So we don't do the value of the land, rather the value, the number of years till the Yovel year. Again, if you remember, in the Jubilee year, in the Yovel year, all the land goes back to its original familial owner. And therefore, right, property is going to be worth more the longer you have till the Yovel year, right? If next year is the Yovel year, so if I want, the value of that land is much, right, is nominal because I only have 1 year to use it, as opposed to if the Yovel year is in 40 years from now. And therefore, that's how you value the land. Let's say you sanctify smaller trees or a smaller area. You did not sanctify the field, you only sanctified the trees. And then you redeem each tree at the value of the tree, because obviously you can sell a tree however you want. Rabbi Akiva says that, if you remember, we discussed this last week, or we've been discussing it for a while now. When someone sells something, we talked about, do you sell it generously, be'ayin yafa, or stingily, I guess is the word, right? Be'ayin ra'ah. So here, Rabbi Akiva says that for sanctifying something, it's also similar, right? When you sanctify something, you do it be'ayin yafa, right? You do it generously. Therefore, you're going to include the property around the trees. The sages say that when you sell something, you do it ba'ayin ra'ah, meaning in a stingy manner, right? You're selling the minimal amount. But when you sanctify something, again, because we're giving it to the temple, so then that is ba'ayin yafa. And therefore, even the sages will agree that in that case, it is going to be done generously. Rabbi Shimon holds that if you sanctify 3 trees, it does not include the land, meaning he says there is an idea of being stingy even when sanctifying something. And again, right, do we see sanctification like selling or not? And therefore we have that machluket. And if you sanctify trees and then you sanctify the land around it, so then because you sanctified it in 2 stages, you're going to redeem it in 2 stages. You redeem the trees for their value, and then the land, as we said before, 1 shekel per year till Yovel. But if you sanctified them together, so then it's a different situation. If you have a field that cannot be a sde achuza, cannot be a family estate, so then it's redeemed for, it's redeemed for its value, and it has nothing to do with the Yovel year. But if the field isn't a inherited property now, but it will be later, then, right, so let's say a son bought a piece of land from his father, right? Again, when the father dies, he inherits it, but right now he bought it. So because it will be a stay achuzah, let's say if you sanctified it, so when you redeem it, you redeem it as if it was a family estate. Maybe you focus on when it's being redeemed, meaning if the father passed away already and now he inherited the land, then you redeem it like the estate that it is. But right, again, even though he originally bought the land, because now he already inherited it, so now it becomes the family estate, and you only do 1 shekel per year. If you remember last week, we talked about the carob and the sycamore trees. When they're mature, they're treated as they're trees, obviously, but they're also, a part of it is treated like land. What does that mean? It's treated as a tree because obviously it's a tree, and also because if it's sold with 2 other trees, so remember we said if you sold 3 trees, you get the land between it, so it counts like a tree, but it's also considered like land in the sense that it's not included as part of the field. Remember we said last week that if you sold a field and it had a mature carob tree on it, the tree is not included in the sale. So even though generally trees would be included in the sale, for this, they are not included. And since we're talking about things that are, have 2 aspects to it, so the Gemara says that a sheaf of grain, that's 2 se'ah, so it's like a bundle, right? It's like an omer, it's like a bundle, but it could also be like a pile, what's called a gadish, right? So it's like a bundle, because if you forgot this plus 2 more, so then it's considered 3. And then if you remember, we had the idea of shechecha. Shechecha is a gift that's given to the poor, right? If you forget 1 or 2 things in the field, you have to leave it for the poor people. But if it's 3, you can go back and get it because it's seen as already a lot. So this sheaf of grain, if you forgot it plus 2 others, it's seen like a pile and like an omer, a bundle. But if you forgot it by itself, it's like a pile and you can't go back for it. Okay, and with that, we finish the 4th chapter, and now we're going to begin the 5th chapter. This chapter is going to be talking about buying movable objects. We're going to start pretty big, so it's not necessarily things you put in your pocket, but things that are movable, as opposed to last chapter, which was things that are not movable, land, houses, right? That's how we started with those things. Now we're talking about movable objects. So we're going to be discussing, we're going to be discussing kinyanim, right? Ways to acquire objects. If you remember, the last chapter we spoke about chazaka, things that you're going to do to show that you own this property. Here, we're going to talk about things that you're going to do to acquire the property. Okay, so let's go. Daf 73. Actually, 1 second. Okay. Daf 73. The Mishnah tells us, let's say you sell a ship. What is included in the sale of a ship? It includes the mast, the sail, the anchor, right, and other things that you need to sail the ship. It does not include the slaves that maybe row the boat, or the sacks or the cargo. However, if you said, I'm selling you the ship and everything in it, so then it includes everything. And now the Gemara is going to explain that you a nes, even though the word nes in Hebrew also means a miracle, but here it means the sail or the mast. An ogen is the anchor, right? Because it holds the ship back. And there was a word in the Mishnah which was manhigim, the things that direct the ship. These are the oars, right? So these things are included in the sail of the ship. What is also included is the gangplank, a water tank, and like the rowboat, right? The like safety boat that it comes with. Those things are included in the ship. Now, since we mentioned ships, the Gemara goes off on a tangent, actually a 21 story tangent. The Gemara now brings up 21 stories, mostly by Rabba Bar Chana, but not all of them. And many of them are quite fantastical. They are not meant to be taken literally. There are a lot of stories, so we're not going to go. I am going to tell you what the stories are, but I'm not going to go into the explanations for all of these stories. But if you're interested, if you do have the art scroll or the Schottenstein Gemara, it does bring in the footnotes some very fascinating explanations. A lot of them see the stories as metaphorical. So let's go through the stories, and then maybe at the end, if you want to think about some, I guess, think of it allegorically. Again, don't forget that definitely in the Gemara, but even in the Torah is likened to water, also to fire. We're going to have like water, fire, ships. We're going to have some fish and whales. It's going to be very exciting. So let's begin. The first one is that Rabba Bar Chana says, once upon a time, well, not once upon a time, once I was on a ship, and we saw a wave that was so large, it seemed to have like white fire, right? That's like the foam on the top of the waves, and a stick with 3 names of God. The next story, there are 300 parsot, which is like, I guess around like a mile, 300 parsot between the waves. And once there was a wave that lifted the ship so high, it came close to the stars. And then one wave said to the other, right, did you destroy the whole world? Like, you're so huge. Did you destroy everything? Did you leave any destruction for me? And then the other wave said, what are you talking about? We can't cross over to the sand, and therefore we can't destroy the whole world, right? This reminds us of the story of Noah, right? Where God almost destroyed the entire world, or did destroy the whole world, and then promised he would not do it again, right? Using water. Then we have another story of a demon named Hormin, and he chased someone, and the person didn't know that he was being chased, and then Hormin or Hormis was jumping from one mule to another while pouring wine from one cup to another. And then when the king heard about this, he actually killed him. There's a discussion, who was the king? Is it the king of the demons, and that's why he killed a demon? Is a king of the humans, and somehow he killed this demon? Again, right? A human being chased by, right, an evil inclination. Anyway, you can interpret the stories as you will. Fourth story, once upon a time, right, I saw this re'em. Re'em is like not a deer. I think it's like a mountain goat. I think elk. I don't think so. Anyway, re'em is some type of animal, and it was the size of Har Tavor, which is a very large mountain in Israel. The next story, once he saw a frog the size of a city, and then the sea monster came and swallowed it. And then a raven came and swallowed the sea monster, and then it sat on a tree. Again, okay, Zohar says it's an oryx. That doesn't mean, I mean, I know what it looks like. It has these very straight, tall horns. Can you check if it's in the goat family or in the deer family? I don't remember, but I'm going to keep going. Once upon a time, Rabbi Bar Chana saw a fish. It had this small, like sherets, like a little creature went up its nose and it killed the fish. And then it died on the shore, and it was so big that it actually killed 60 cities with its body, and then 60 cities, like 60 people from 60 cities came and ate from the meat, and then they built huts out of the bones. Next story, once he saw a fish with sand on its back, and a meadow grew there, and then they thought it was dry land, so then they went on the land. This, I think, is a very famous, like, ancient Near East myth. And then and then I think they make a fire on the fish, basically, but they don't know that it's a fish. They think it's an island. And when the fish got hot, it actually flipped over, and the people almost drowned. But thank God their ship was right there, so they did not. They did not die. Eighth story: there was once a ship that sailed between the fins of a very large fish. It actually took 3 days to get between the two fins. That's how large it was. Next story, once upon a time, they saw a bird standing with its ankles in the water and its head in the sky. And the water, right, was very deep. Again, these are very good allegories for learning Torah, right? You have to have your feet in the ground, right? Be grounded, and in the head, your head in the sky, right? So kind of being realistic a little bit, but also striving for spirituality. These are stories. We're on a tangent. They're all stories by Rabbi Bar Chana. The reason they're here is because we mentioned ships. So because we mentioned ships, we're talking about any story that starts with once upon a time I was on a ship. So that's where we're going. Again, so those were all the ship, water, fish stories. Now we're going to the desert. In story number 10, once upon a time, we went to the desert and we saw these geese, and they were very, very fat, and there was rivers of oil that came from it. And don't worry, we were told that we're going to eat from these geese in the next world, in Olam Haba. Next story, once upon a time, we saw an Arab merchant in the desert. And he was able to know the way based on smelling the sand. They say even that they tried to trick him, but he wasn't tricked, and he really knew exactly where to go. The story continues, or the next story, story number 12. This Arab merchant said, I'm going to show, right, again, he knows the desert. So he says, I'm going to show you the people who died in the desert over the 40 years, right? Basically, the Jews who lived in the desert. He's like, I'm going to show you where they are. And then they saw these huge people. And Rabba, again, these are stories by Rabba Batra. So Rabba Batra says he took the tzitzit from one of the people there, and he got stuck, like they wouldn't let him move. And then he returned the tzitzit, and then he could leave. Okay, Daf 74. Rabba Batra, they tell us really his name is Rebbe Abba, but they shortened it to Rabba, like Rabbi Abba. So he's Rabba. Okay, story number 13. The same Arab merchant says, I'm going to show you Har Sinai, right? Sinai mountain. And they get there to this mountain and they see these scorpions around it. And a divine voice comes out and says, who will annul the vow that I took when I sent the Jewish people into exile? Right? Like this is God saying, I can't believe I exiled the people. And then when the rabbis heard Rabba Batra saying the story, they said, you're so silly. Why did you say I'll annul it, right? You're a great rabbi. You can annul a vow. And then the Gemara says that Rabba thought it was a vow about the Mabul. Remember, we were just talking about, God takes a vow to never destroy the earth. So Rabba thought it was that was the vow we were talking about, and he did not want to annul that vow. Next, story 14, the Arab merchant says, I'm going to show you where Korach was swallowed up into the desert. Remember, the desert's mouth opens up and swallows Korach, and they basically he takes them to this place where there are two cracks in the ground, and this is the entrance to Gehenom, what some people might say, right, Gehenna, some people might say hell. But when they stood there, they could hear the sons of Korach. If you remember, there's a story, a midrash, that says that the sons of Korach repented. This is actually good for Elul when we're in repenting season. So he could hear in these cracks in the desert, the sons of Korach saying, Moshe v'Torato emet, right? Moses, and his Torah are truth, right? And the idea is that Korach's sons were like saved, but like because they were bad, but then they did tshuva, so they don't fall fully into Gehenom, but they're kind of like saved on the ledge over there. So you could hear their voices. Where these places are, I do not know. Story number 15, he says, I'm going to show you where heaven and earth meet. And when they get to this place, Rabba puts down a basket. And then when he comes back a little bit later, it's not there. And the idea is, and this is, I think, just fascinating in terms of like Talmudic astronomy, right? So where in our perception do heaven and earth meet, right? At like the horizon, right? And what's the idea? That's the place where the earth is going to rotate, right? So the idea is that Rabba Batra puts down a basket, and when he leaves and then he comes back, the basket isn't there, right? Because the idea is, oh, the earth like rotated away from where he was, or the sky, or however you want to understand it. I guess the earth stays and the sky rotates in their perception. And then he's like, oh, I came back 24 hours and my basket was there. So again, I think it's just interesting. Obviously, again, I don't think this is meant to be taken literally, even in those days. But I think it's an interesting way to think about them explaining the movement of the heavens and the earth. So I thought it was just fascinating. Okay, story number 16 is actually Rabbi Yochanan. He says, right, I once saw a fish with eyes that looked like the moon. And then Rav Safra says, story number 17, I once saw a fish that had horns like a sea goat, or it was a sea goat. Story number 18, Rabbi Yochanan says, once again, back to I was on a ship. Once I was on a ship and I saw a chest with precious stones in it, and it was surrounded by fish. And inside there was tchelet that was for the righteous people, the tzaddikim, for the next world, right? Tchelet is the blue string that we put on the tzitzit, and this was something that was being guarded for the righteous people for Olam Haba. Story number 19, Rabbi Yehuda once saw a precious stone surrounded by a sea monster, and then a bird came and chopped off its head, and then the diver took the stone and put it on these like dead birds that were on the ship, and then they came to life, and then they picked up the stone and they flew away with the stone. Again, all meant to be taken metaphorically, the idea of precious stones maybe being the Torah, and then, right, our evil inclinations, kind of distract us from the Torah, but we can get it back in the end. Story number 20, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua were once on a ship, and they saw a great light in the sea, and this was the eyes of the Leviathan. The Leviathan is I think I'm going to say mystical creature. We're going to talk more about the Leviathan in a minute. It is a sea creature, but it has spiritual connotations. Last story, they were once in the desert and they were roasting meat on coals, and these coals ended up glowing for a whole year. It turns out that they were from the rotem wood, and that's why they sustained their heat for so long. Okay, that is the end of our stories by Rabba Bar Bar Chana and his friends. But since we mentioned the Leviathan, we're now going to talk about the Leviathan, right? In English, Leviathan. Right, I think maybe in Christianity, are there also, I think, stories of the Leviathan? I think so. So I think it's also like apocalyptic. But here the Gemara is going to talk about the stories of the Leviathan. So the creation of the Leviathan, right? God created, the Torah tells us in Breshit, it says that God created Taninim Gdolim, large creatures. Now, in modern Hebrew, a tanin is an alligator. Some people say, what is a large alligator or large reptile? Some people say these are the dinosaurs. The Gemara is not saying that. That's pre-dinosaurs or right, the revelation of or whatever. I'm not getting into that. But here the Gemara says, what were these large reptiles? Oh, it was the Leviathan. Sorry, it was either the Re'em. Remember we had a Re'em before? It was the Re'em. So some say it's the Re'em and of the sea, and others say that it was the Leviathan. Some say it was a straight snake versus a curved snake of the Leviathan. But either way, it's this sea creature. So now, since we're talking about the creation of the world, so God created everything in the world with a male and a female, right? Zachar unekeva bara otam. Right? The idea is that when God created everything in the world, he created them so that they can procreate. Now that's lovely unless you're creating super dangerous mystical animals, and then maybe you might not want there to be many of them. So that's what happened. God created two Leviathanim, right? One male and one female. The male was infertile, and then he killed the female. He killed the female for the tzaddikim, right? There's another Gemara that says that the righteous people in the next world are going to feast on the meat of the Leviathan. It's kosher in some way. Okay, another how do I say, another creature, mystical creature that has to do with the next world is something called the behema or behemot. Literally, the word means animals. God created these very large creatures. Again, also one male, one female. But again, God didn't want them to have children because they were, I don't know, either dangerous, too large, they could destroy the world. Therefore, he made, again, the man infertile, and then he cooled off the female so that she wouldn't want to have babies. And again, the tzaddikim are going to eat from these animals in the next world. God, speaking of the sea, God told the angel of the sea to open its mouth and to swallow the water so that he can create the world. Again, if you remember, again, all of these stories or ideas have like mystical meanings. I don't think that they're meant to be taken literally, but if you remember, in the beginning of the Torah, it says that the world is tohu vavohu, right? It is like chaos, and there's water covering the whole world. So what does God say? You need to, right, water needs to swallow up some of water, like however you want to understand it, right? The earth needs to swallow up some of the water so that there's room for land and for other things to come into creation. So, right, and then the angel of the sea said, I can't do it. So God killed him, and then the sea covered up his body. Since we're talking about water, we're going to talk about the water of Israel. The Jordan River comes from the Banyas. Banyas is actually a river up north in the Golan. The Banyas, is that true? Yeah, I think it's in the Golan. And the water goes through to the Kinneret, and then it goes down into the mouth of the Leviathan. Where the Leviathan is, I couldn't tell you, but you should just know that all the water goes into his mouth. In the next world, in Olam Haba, the Leviathan and the Behemot are going to fight each other. It's going to be part of either the entertainment or it's part of it's part of the schedule of the next world. And then the Gemara tells us that there are 7 seas and 4 rivers around Israel. Okay, Daf 75, we're going to continue with the Leviathan. Gabriel, the angel, is going to hunt the Leviathan, and the Leviathan heats up the deep water when it's hungry, and it drinks the seawater. And again, as we said, God is going to make a huge feast for the tzaddikim, for the righteous people, from the meat of the Leviathan. This is based on certain verses, and Daf 75 brings those verses. The rest of the meat is going to be sold in the stores of Jerusalem. So if you're excited about eating Leviathan meat, it'll be available for sale in Olam Haba, in the Shuk of Yerushalayim. So get ready. Okay, also, and this is good as we're coming up to Sukkot, God is going to make a sukkah, right? Some shade for the righteous people from the skin of the Leviathan. If you're less worthy, so then you'll have like a little bit of shade. You don't have like the VIP cabanas, but you have like a little bit of maybe a pergola, where you have a little bit of shade. If you're less worthy, so then you get like a little necklace of the skin from the Leviathan. If you're less worthy, you're going to get like an amulet from the skin. And if you're less worthy, so then you're just going to see the splendor of the shine from the skins that as they hang on the walls of Jerusalem. So, we better start doing mitzvot so that we can be worthy for the whole Cabana experience. God is going to bring precious stones. They're going to be huge. He's going to carve, right? They're going to be so big that God's going to have to carve out an entranceway into Jerusalem through these precious stones. Also, right, God is going to raise us up to great spiritual heights. He's actually going to raise up Jerusalem to a very high, very high. That's why you need such a and we're going to be so spiritually great. That's why we're going to need big entrances, because we're not going to fit through the small entrances. Not only that, but God is going to make 7 chupot, like a chuppah, like from a wedding. He's going to make 7 chupot for each tzaddik, and they're right. What are they made out of? Clouds and fire. It's actually based on a verse of different things. Or God is going to make a chuppah for each person based on their level. So, right, everyone's going to get a different type of chuppah. Now, what's interesting here, and also with the one before with the skin of the Leviathan, what's interesting is that it's saying everybody can see everybody else's, thing that they get. So the sages say, be careful, because you're going to be embarrassed that you didn't get, right? You only got bronze, you didn't get silver, right? And then when the silver, oh, but you didn't get gold. And here the Gemara says it's not that someone's going to make fun of you, but you're going to feel bad, right? You're going to feel bad that you didn't get VIP, first class, fully reclining seats, right? And I think, again, the Gemara is trying to say to us, and I think it's a beautiful message now in Elul, right? Be aware, like do tshuva now, right? If you do tshuva now, God is building you a beautiful first class ticket, with, I don't know, beachfront views. So the more mitzvot we do, the better it will be in the next world. Okay, and then since we're talking about these canopies, Hashem is going to make 10 canopies for man in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, again based on the verse. And the cheapest one was made out of gold, right? You can imagine what the other ones are like. Okay, right? Jerusalem of this world. This was also fascinating, right? Since we were talking about the next world, so the Gemara tells us, Jerusalem of this world, anybody who wants to go can go. I was actually at the Kotel 2 hours ago, right? If you want to go, you just jump in your car or get on a plane, you can go. But Jerusalem of the next world, the only people who can go are those who are invited. And if you're invited, so then you're lucky you can go. For me, I took this as a message of take advantage of the fact that you can go now, and try to be one of the lucky ones that gets to go in the next world. Okay, from then the Gemara talks about tzaddikim, the righteous people are called by God's names. So too the Moshiach, right, the Messiah, also Jerusalem, all of them are called by God's names. The Gemara continues and tells us that God is going to lift up Jerusalem very high in the sky. So if you lift it high in the sky, how are you going to get there? So the Gemara says, don't worry. People are going to get there like they're floating on a cloud. Somehow they're going to get there, right? Maybe they'll fly on an airplane. The Gemara talks about what Jerusalem is going to look like. God is going to add many gardens to Jerusalem, and towers and castles and fortresses, and it's going to be much larger than it is today. Okay, the end for all the stories. So anybody who's interested, that was on Daf 74 and 75. If you want to go look up those stories, you can. But now we're at the bottom of Daf 75, and now we get back to selling a ship. So we said let's say when you sell a ship, so that now the question is, how do you acquire it? How do I buy a ship? Now, it's very interesting because in the modern world, how do you buy something? You pay for it. As soon as you pay for it, it's yours. Um, in in the halachic world, payment is not the end of the deal. It's definitely a part of the deal, but it's not the end of the deal. The person who's buying the item needs to acquire the item. Now, there are three different ways one can acquire a movable item. And the Gemara is going to explain this in a minute, but I'm just going to tell us now before we read it, and then I'll say it again. The best way to acquire an item is called hagbaha. Hagbaha, like gova, right, means to lift. If you lift something, it's obviously mine, right? I'm not going to let you lift something that's mine because it's mine. Don't touch my things. If I let you, so then maybe, so I let you. Again, we can discuss what that means. Okay, that's the best thing to do. The next thing to do is what's called mishicha. Mishicha means to pull something to you, right? So I can pull my computer to me because it's mine. If it's yours, I don't have permission to pull it to me. And the third thing is what's called misira. Misira means I'm handing over control of the item, right? So let's say it's a ship, right? So if I give you the ropes that are holding, the ship to shore, that's if I just give you the ropes, you didn't pull the ship. But if I just give it to you, I'm showing that I'm giving you the ability to acquire it, or I'm giving you the rights to this ship. So now we'll discuss it in the Gemara. Okay, so again, hagbaha is lifting, mishicha, pulling, and misira is handing over. Like limsor mashu means to hand it over. Okay, so now we're going to have a machloket, obviously. So with the ship, so the first opinion is, okay, so the first opinion is if you pull it a little bit, again, mishicha. Now, we didn't discuss how far you have to pull something. So one opinion is you just have to move it a little bit, and then it becomes yours. Another opinion is you have to completely move it to, like maybe the whole length. Like let's pretend you have a ship and it's docked in your, right, like let's think of like a pier, right? Every ship has a parking spot. So I could say I just have to move the ship a little bit forward, backwards, maybe. Now it becomes my ship. Or maybe I actually have to move it out of your parking spot and put it into my parking spot. Those are the two opinions. But they both are talking about mishicha, pulling. Okay. Another opinion is misira. I only have to hand over control. Now, this is done, let's say, for large animals, right? Let's say you buy a cow. So if you give the person the reins or the saddle, so then you're showing that this is now your animal. Again, misira, you haven't moved the animal. You just have the ability to move it, but you didn't. Okay, so again, mishicha, again, back to pulling. Again, is it that, let's say I want to make the animal, let's say I bought an animal. So does it mean I just want to move it a little bit, or do I have to have it move a lot, right? Like, let's say the whole length of the animal. But with a ship, maybe just moving it a little bit is enough. As opposed to with an animal, maybe you have to move it more, right? Are they parallel or are they not? So Daf 76 tells us that a ship is acquired through mishicha, or maybe you need mishicha, like pulling, plus a document, plus like a sales document, a contract that you sold so-and-so your ship. Or maybe the ship is acquired with pulling, mishicha, but an IOU, right? Like another document is acquired by handing it over, by misira. Or maybe for the document, or maybe maybe the boat is acquired by pulling it, but the documents are acquired only with another document. So now the Gemara is going to explain. Maybe you can just hand over the ropes, mesira, for a boat, and you don't need to pull it. So the Gemara says, well, it actually depends where the boat is. If the boat is in the public domain, so then you cannot do mishicha. You can't pull the item, because pulling the item is only valid if you're pulling it into your own domain. But in the public space, you don't have your own domain. Therefore, the only way to show an acquisition is by handing over the reins in a public domain. But if you're on like a side alleyway where it's more private, so then mishicha is the valid form of acquisition. Again, as we said, you can always do hagbaha. You can always lift it. Again, you're not lifting a ship, so that's not practical here. Or another thing you can do is you can rent the area. Let's say the ship is on dry dock, like on the land. You can rent the area underneath the ship, and now the ship becomes yours. Okay, let's go back to acquiring an IOU, right? So again, in those days, let's say, or not in those days, anytime, you take out a loan or you borrow money. So it says, right, you have a document that says, I, Ruvain, owe Shimon $100, right? So Shimon holds that document and it's worth $100, right? Think about a check, right? When you write a check to another person, you're transferring money, but it's really a piece of paper. So now let's say I want to give this IOU to somebody else. So how do I do that, right? So the Gemara tells us you actually have to write another document that says, I, Ruvain, am giving Levi this document of, right, that Shimon, I don't remember our names anymore, but that Ruvain owes Shimon $100. You understand, right? So you have to write a document, and you have to write it very clearly. And this is, I think, is also fascinating. You have to write that you're selling or giving the value that's written on the paper, not the value of the paper, right? Again, a check can have two values. It could have the value of 10 cents of the paper, right? What do we say? It's not worth the value, right? It's not worth the paper that it's written on, right? So the paper is worth 10 cents, but the check is $100. So if you're selling or giving this check, you need to write, I'm giving you the value that's written on this piece of paper, not just the paper. Okay, Daf 77. Another opinion is, no, you do not have to write a document, because it's like saying to acquire a document, you don't need another document. You have to do something else, right? You don't acquire words with more words. You have to actually just hand it over, and that's enough. Okay. And then, okay, let's get to the next Mishnah. Let's say you sold a wagon, right? So we sold a ship, now we're selling a wagon. If you sell a wagon, you do not sell, it doesn't mean that you sold the mules that were pulling the wagon. If you sell the mules, it doesn't mean that you sold the wagon. If you sold the yoke, right, the thing that ties the oxen together, it doesn't necessarily mean that you sell the oxen. If you sold the oxen, you didn't sell the yoke. And now the Gemara says, well, actually, it depends what you paid for, right? So, or what you said, right? If you say, sell me the yoke for 200 zuz, it doesn't make sense that you're selling a piece of wood for 200 zuz. Obviously, you meant sell me the yoke with the oxen attached to it. And then the Gemara, another opinion is no. The Mishnah says it doesn't matter what you paid. You don't get the oxen, right? If you paid 200 zuz, that's your problem. So now the Gemara explains, if you sold the wagon, maybe you do get the mules. Again, if they're attached at the time of the sale, so then you get them. If not, you don't get them. And again, it depends what you call things, right? If you call a wagon the wagon plus the mules, so then maybe that is what you sold. Okay, daf 78, last daf. Again, when Chachamim said it doesn't matter what you paid, that doesn't make sense. What does that mean, right? So if, let's say I spent $200 on a piece of wood, either it means that the sale is void because we misunderstood each other, or if it's really so much more money, it's not invalid because maybe it's saying, I wanted to give you a gift of $200 or, 190, and, I got the yoke as like a bonus. Okay, next Mishnah. We're getting smaller and smaller. The next Mishnah is you sold a donkey. So what's included in the sale of a donkey? So the gear isn't included, right? The kelim, the things that are associated with the mule, or maybe, yes, it is included. So the Gemara says it depends. If the gear was on it and you say, sell me this donkey, then you get everything that's on it. If you say, sell me that donkey, that's your donkey, sell me that. So then the gear is not included. And the Gemara is going to explain what does it mean, gear? So it's the sack and the saddlebag and the side saddle. So the Gemara says, in general, a donkey. So now we have to define what's the donkey for. It's a machloket. One opinion is the donkey is meant for riding. Again, horses are very expensive, so not a lot of people have horses. So the donkey is is the car, and therefore the saddlebag or the sack, those are carrying things. So that would not be included if the donkey is for riding, right? The saddle would be included, but not like the bags and things like that. But if the donkey is for carrying, right, again, if the donkey is your pickup truck and it's there for carrying your things, so then it's essential, all the sacks that come with it. So as I said, the saddle, the straps, everything, those are included. Those are used for riding. But like the side saddle isn't used because that's seen as like carrying the woman. She's not really riding. She's just sitting side saddle. Now there's a discussion, are these things, the gear, is it only sold if it's on the donkey at that time, or it's not included even if it's on the donkey? And the Gemara has a machloket about that. Let's say you sold the wagon. It's a machloket if the mules are included, only if they're attached. If they're not attached, then for sure they're not included. The Gemara talks about there are rabbis who hold that when you sell something, all the accessories that are attached to that item, again, not physically attached, but are associated with that item, are sold with it. Not everyone agrees with that opinion. Okay, last Mishnah for today. If you sell the donkey, the baby, the foal, 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 I think that's how you say it. Okay, so the foal is included. If you sell a cow, the calf is not included. The Gemara is going to explain. And the Mishnah continues, right? If you sell an area for garbage, like the garbage area, so then the manure is included. If you sell a pit, then the water is included. If you sell a beehive, the bees are included. If you sell a dovecote, then the birds are included. So now the Gemara explains, what is this? Go back to our donkey and the cow. What did you say? Right? So the Gemara says, you said, I'm selling a nursing donkey or a nursing cow. So the Gemara says, well, if you're selling a nursing cow, that's good for you. You want the milk. It doesn't mean that you want the baby. You just want the milk. So you get the cow, but not the calf. Again, if you want it, you can pay extra. Here, the point is what's included in the sale. But the donkey, if you're saying I'm selling a nursing donkey, it's not sold for milk. The donkey's milk is not kosher. So you don't care about the milk. Rather, it must mean that you're selling the nursing mother with its baby. So the Gemara tells us that a baby donkey is called a siach, from the word sicha, conversation. And the Gemara says a baby donkey will listen to if you speak to it nicely and calmly, then it will follow you. When it's an adult, it won't. But when it's a baby, it will listen to you. And since we're talking about gentle speech, the Gemara goes on another tangent based on a verse in Bamidbar, the 21st chapter. So then it explains the verse that if you weigh out gain versus loss, you won't be doing positive mitzvot or negative, or sins, mitzvot or sins, if you weigh the gain versus the loss, you won't be led astray by the gentle voice of the Yetzer Hara. And again, I think it's beautiful, back to our Elul idea of tshuva, The Yetzer Hara doesn't necessarily have to yell. It just whispers quietly, you know you want to do this, Don't you know? Or it's really not such a big deal, Nothing's going to happen if you fill in the blank. So here again, siach, it whispers gently, and here it's in a negative way. It's like the evil inclination is trying to entice you in a gentle voice. If you do listen to it, you're going to be led astray and you're going to get punished. And then it gets a little fire and brimstone, and there's fire, and the fire is going to torment your soul. And therefore, follow the Torah and do mitzvot, and then everything is going to be good. So with that, we finish for today. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will pick this up next Wednesday. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And if you want, we can have 2 minutes of discussion if anybody has any questions or comments. Yes, Aliza.
This will be quick because there's other people. But after listening to the Mishnah about the stories and then the Mishnah after, I think Rabbi Abba or Rabbah was giving you allegorical hints about Olam Haba. And I now have it, so I'm going to go read it because now I'm fascinated. I'll read it at my speed.
Yes, I'm sorry that it was fast. There are a lot of stories there. So definitely go back to Bava Batra.
It was 74 and 75, you say?
Exactly, 74 and 75. If you have an art scroll or a
no, it's Steinsaltz, but it's English.
Steinsaltz, great. They have notes. There are some commentaries that give a different perspective. Exactly, it's not meant to be taken literally. It's meant to be taken allegorically. The question is it about this world, the next world, Torah, mitzvot? So feel free to look into it further. Yeah, okay. There's a lot there.
Can I ask a question? But if you want to slap my hands, you can do it. You looked different last time or time before. You had something different on your head. What was that?
I was wearing, in Hebrew we call it a mitpachat. It's a scarf. And I do wear it in the summer here. I usually wear it on Shabbat, but last week I was wearing it during the week. So maybe I'll do it again next week. We'll see. Usually
it's not a tickle.
Like a tichel, that's the Yiddish word. Tichel also is like a kerchief.
Okay.
These are like bigger, so you tie it kind of.
Thank you.
Turban-y. Yeah.
Turban-y.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to say that the pronunciation is siach.
Siach.
No, siach without any pause between the S and the Y.
Siach. You're saying instead of siach.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
It's one syllable.
Okay.
And yes, these stories, that's one thing they always say that characterizes the Talmud about how you just never know what's coming. And it was organized that way to be just full of change and surprise, whatever, but it's never never nonsensical. And we can't reverse engineer to know exactly why the editors chose to drop all of these stories right here. But you know, I mean, for me, I would be saying, well, we've been full of all of these discernments about buying and selling and what goes with what when I say what. And then just all of a sudden there are these stories, and then we go back to the same. I mean, did you yourself, Rabbanit, see any kind of rhyme or reason to it?
So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. First of all, the tangent was again, it's almost like stream of consciousness. Ship, oh, ship, water. Let me tell you a story, right? How many times do we have conversations with friends and someone says, you know, I went to Tel Aviv to buy. Wait, you went to Tel Aviv? Did I tell you last week I went to Tel Aviv? And right, meaning I think it's meant to feel, even though it's funny because I think it's meant to feel natural. Like when we have a conversation, we do think in this way. Though when we're studying, I think sometimes it's challenging. I actually heard a TED talk. Actually, my son sent it to me about like educational techniques. And he was saying how, you know, it's really important to not do, I forgot what it was called, but like not to do like linear teaching, but you're supposed to do, there was
Logical
another word.
versus, yeah.
There was another word for it, where it's like more like it's like horizontal, like you bring up different things in the same conversation. There was a word for it and I forgot right now. But I said to him, it's so funny that that's like a new educational model. 2,000 years ago, the rabbis formatted the Gemara exactly in that way, right? Like it's not, you know, it's not like, oh, we're talking about sales, so the next 170 pages are going to be about sales, but we're going to see how it's
Organic.
going
I
to
think they use the word organic.
Associative.
exactly
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
those words,
Word
right?
association.
Meaning, oh, just like, and the truth is they do that now, right? Like if you learn something in Torah, well, that also maybe we should learn the parallel thing in science, or we should learn the parallel thing in
It's
history.
organic.
Right? And
Yeah.
I think that that's what the Gemara is doing. And I liked how you said, Ilani, right? We've been talking about like buying, selling, buying, selling. Oh, by the way, speaking of ships, last week I went on a ship and guess what I saw, right? And I think it's really meant to almost keep us on our toes. Like, so if you remember a long time ago, we learned this idea of like, what do you like better, the stories or the laws, right? And the end of that story was you need both, right? We can't have one without the other. It can't always be dry law and it can't always be stories, but we do need both. So this week we definitely felt it. And
I think
yeah,
Rabbi, I think our scholars know so much more about Olam Haba, and for some reason they can't just come out and talk about it, and that's why it's allegorical. And he probably just took the chance and went for it. How many stories were there? More than 16. So he'd been saving up a while.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I also felt this connection of this calculating and of this, you better be careful about when you say this goes with that, and I tell you you now will attain that. It's and what I say and what I mean and what you're thinking, would you be very, very careful. And then he says, now
Interesting.
let's talk about the world to come. So I'm thinking that I'm saying seeing there that we should be thinking, oh, so there's an association there too. What I'm doing
Beautiful.
down here is acquiring a future for myself I don't even understand.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I always talk about the air conditioning being put in up there. You know, with air conditioning, maybe a swimming pool. So you
Yeah.
know, we gotta build a nice house up there.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you, sweetie, for so much.
all right.
There's a compilation of all the Agadita. It's called Ein Yaakov,
Yeah.
and without all the halachas, without all the rules. And in Beit Yaakov, where the rule in Beit Yaakov is you're not allowed to teach Gemara to girls,
I
so
know.
they teach them only Ein Yaakov.
The stories.
That's the stories, Rabbi Akiva
Right.
and all the stories, but not
Right.
not the halacha. But and the halacha they
Exactly.
teach differently, but not from the Gemara, not
Exactly.
inside the Gemara.
Exactly. All right. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Bezrat Hashem.
shalom.
We will continue next week.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
See you
Bye
all.
bye.
Shabbat
Bye
Shalom.
bye. Bye bye,
That's
guys.
right. Thank you so much.